Hello everyone. In this lecture, I want to talk about how to write functions in R. Even though writing R functions is not the focus of this class, being able to write new functions with R is a very important skill to business analysts. Also, writing new functions in R is very interesting. So I want to use this lecture to introduce the fundamental rules of writing R functions to everyone. Some classmates ask me a very good question. Professor, in the introduction lecture, you said R is free to use. Free is very good. But if everything is free in R, how could the developers and the companies that offers R analytics make money? This is a very good question. Actually, in the IT industry and the business analytics industry, everybody is looking for money for a new technology. How can I make money when I develop a new skill, new technology, or new package? There hasn't been an established business model for the R community. However, some companies have achieved their business values. Revolution Analytics is one of the few companies that have actualized its business value. So before today's lecture, I want to briefly talk about the development history of this company. Maybe the success of Revolution Analytics can inspire some classmates to find out more business models for the R community by developing new functions. Revolution Analytics was founded in 2007. The founders of this company believed that R had a weakness. R is a very powerful system, but this system was not very competent in analyzing big data sets. So the founders of Revolution Analytics developed a new function called Scale R by integrating the R software and Hadoop, a framework for big data set analysis. The function received popularity among companies such as Pfizer and academics from medicine research, pharmaceutical research, and business research. This is how Revolution Analytics received its first fortune. With the popularity of the Scale R function, the company received a lot of attention from the industry leaders. In 2015, Revolution Analytics was acquired by Microsoft. Microsoft didn't disclose how much it paid for this acquisition, but some reports estimated that this acquisition could be worth tens of millions of dollars. This is a brief history of Revolution Analytics. The lessons learned here are, when we get familiar to the R system and the R function development in the future, you can find some weaknesses of the R system and then develop new functions to address these weaknesses. If your new function is useful among the R community, somebody will pay you to write customized function. Maybe you can open your own business. After it gets successful, you can sell this business to the industry leaders. I want to use this example to show everybody how companies in the R industry make money. I also wish this case can inspire some classmates to find out more business values by developing new R functions. Now let's start learning how to develop new functions in R. When we develop new functions in R, we must follow certain rules. Let's start with this simple example. First, you want to give this new function a function name. It can be any name, as long as it follows the rules for creating a variable in R. After the function name, you want to type in a less than a small dash. This means you want to start writing the new function and then give this new function to the function name here. After the small dash sign, you must type in function. Because R is case sensitive, you cannot type in function in uppercase. Function must be in lowercase. After function, you should type in a set of parentheses. And then after the parentheses, you type in a curly brace. Between the curly brace, you want to write the codes that offers the function to the user. In this example, I used a very simple function called a printf to print a message for the customer. In the future, you can replace printf with the functions you want to offer to your users. For instance, calculate the mean of some numbers. As you can see, developing a new function is very simple in R. When we complete this new function, give it to the users to use. They should follow some rules as well. If they want to use our function, they must type in the exact function name when we create this function. And then after the function name, they should type in the set of parentheses, like you can see on this slide. If they type in ball app parentheses, they will be able to see the message hello world. Let's try out this example in the R software. Let's go to R. Because ball app is a new function, we haven't developed it in the R software yet. So at this moment, if a user types in ball app parentheses, she will see an error message. In order to help the R software to recognize ball app, this new function, we have to develop this function in the R software. The way of developing it is, first we want to type in the function name ball app, and then a less than sign, and then a small dash. After the small dash, we need to type in function, and then parentheses. Press enter. Now you can see a plus sign. The plus sign in R means the software is waiting on you to type in more comments. Because R can only accept one line of comments every time. So if you want to type in multiple lines of comments, the R software will use the plus sign to indicate the waiting. After the plus sign, you can type in a curly brace, the opening curly brace, and then press another enter. We can type in more lines of comments here. The service I want to offer in this function is to print a message, hello world. So I type in print parentheses. In R, if you want to print some message, just include this message by 2 double quotes. Hello world. After this, press enter, and then type in the closing curly brace. Now you can see after we typed in the closing curly brace, when we press enter, we will not see the plus sign again, because R recognized that once we type in this closing curly brace, we have finished a new function. If the user wants to use this new function, she should use ball app parentheses, and then press enter. Now she can say hello world, this new message. Some classmates may say it's very difficult to type in the comments line by line in R. If you want to use an external editor to write a new R function in a Windows system, please use the Notepad software. Notepad. Please do not use Microsoft Word. Just use the Notepad software. The reason we want to use the Notepad software is that Notepad does not add formats to the symbols, such as double quotes, comma, period, and so on. If you use Word, Word will automatically add some formats to all of these symbols. The R software cannot recognize the symbols with format. That's why we want to use Notepad software. Notepad does not add any formats on the symbols such as comma, period, or double quotes. Make sure you use Notepad to write a new function in R. Basically, we will do the same in the Notepad function. Let's type in ball app. In order to differentiate, let's say we create a new name, ball new app, and then less than sign, and then small dash, and then type in function, parentheses, and then type in the opening curly brace. After that, type in print function, double quotes. You see, there is no format on the symbols. If you copy these codes into R, you can run the functions without any error. In this case, I just want to print a message for the customer. Hello world. And then after that, I type in the closing curly brace. Now we can copy the code here into the R software. Press enter. Besides the ball app function, now we create a new function called the ball new app. This function can also print the hello world message off on the screen. If the user wants to use this new function, she can type in ball new app parentheses. Press enter. She should be able to see hello world as well. This is how you develop a very simple R function. In the real world, it's not very common to develop a new function that just displays some messages for the users. In most cases, we want to develop some functions that can accept the user's inputs, do the calculations, and then return the result back to the user. We call the user's inputs arguments of our function. If we want to return the result back to the user, we use the keyword return in this function. Let's see some examples. Suppose I want to create a new function. The purpose of this function is to ask the user to give me a number and then multiply this number by 2. After the calculation, I want to return the result back to the user. Let's see the example on this slide. I call this function times 2. Again, you can create your own function name, as long as the function name follows the rules for creating a valid variable name in R. After the function name, I type in the less than sign and then small dash, and then the function keyword. After function, I type in parentheses. This time, between parentheses, I created a variable x. This means my function allows the user to give me one number. When the function receives this number, I want to multiply this number by 2. Notice that I include the calculation by parentheses. In the future, you want to do the same. Include the calculation by parentheses. If you want to give back the result to the user, you use the keyword return. In the future, when this function is used, users should give a number to this function, and then they should be able to see the result. Let's try this out in the R software. Let's use the Notepad to develop this function. Let's call this times 2. And then the less than sign, small dash, function, and then parentheses. Between parentheses, I want to type in x. This means my function can accept one number entered by the user. Next, I want to type in the opening curly brace, and then create a new line, type in return x multiplied by 2. Don't forget to include the calculation by parentheses. And then in the new line, type in the closing curly brace. Now we can copy the codes and then paste them into the R software. Now we have completed the function. When the user uses this function, they should type in times 2 parentheses. This time, between the parentheses, they must give us a number, because this is how the function was specified. They can give us any number, let's say 100, then they should get the result. Let's try another example, times 2, let's say 50. Now they get the right result as well. This is how you accept the user's inputs as arguments for your function, do the calculation, and then return the result back to the user. Some classmates may have a question. What if I want the user to be able to give me more than one number? What should I do? This is a very good question. I want to use an example to answer this question. In this function, I want to calculate the average of two numbers. Actually, this function is very similar to times 2 we just developed. The only difference is between the parentheses, I have two variables now, x and y. This means my function allows the user to enter two numbers. In order to separate x and y, I use a comma between them. Notice that I use a comma. Similar to the previous example, I use the keyword return to give the result back to the user. In the future, when the user uses my function, the user should type in two numbers between the parentheses. Let's try this out in the R software. First, let's write this function in the Notepad software. Let's call this average2. This is the function name. And then less than sign, and then small dash. After that, type in function. Now you should be very familiar to this standard process, right? And then parentheses. Between parentheses, type in x, comma, y. This means this function can accept two numbers from the user. Create a new line, and then type in the opening curly brace. And then use return, the keyword return, and then parentheses. Between the parentheses, we want to include the calculation. Basically, we want to add the two numbers together first, x and y, and then divide this number by 2. And then the closing curly brace. We can copy the codes and then paste them into the R software. If a user wants to use this function, the user should type in average2, and then between the parentheses, the user should type in two numbers, any two numbers. Let's say 11, 22. Press enter, the user gets the result. This is how you accept more than one argument in a function. Before we conclude today's lecture, I want to talk about the keyword return. The key feature of return is to terminate a function, which means anything below the return statement will not be executed by the function. Let's say we have this example, times 2 function. Some developers want to be more user-friendly. They want to add a message, "Thank you for using this function," after the return statement. Will the users be able to see the message? Let's take a look. In the Notepad software, we already have the times2 function. So now some developers want to add a method after return. Let's use print, the print function. Thank you for using this function. Let's copy the codes here and then paste them into the R software. Suppose a user wants to use this function times2. Between the parentheses, type in a number, let's say 56. We only see the result, but we couldn't see the method. Why? Because of the key feature of the keyword return. Return will stop the function at the return statement. Anything below the return statement will not be executed. So even though you could have a lot of service after the return statement, the user will not be able to use any service after the return statement. Please remember the key feature of the keyword return. This concludes today's lecture. I will see you soon in the next one.